Hello, video game designers. This is Mr. Sparks, and welcome back to video number 3 or lesson number 3 on our RPG project. So last video we kind of set up our base character, got rid of a few things we didn't need, set up our game mode, and made our base character here the default character that we wanted to use. So in this one we're going to be working in our base character, and we're going to set up some variables that we're going to need to track, some health variables and things like that, and we'll be setting those up and setting up a health system to track damage for our character. So let's go ahead and get started. So if you'll navigate to your RPG folder right here in Blueprints and back into Characters, and we're going to open up our base character. And so when we double click that to open it up, we'll let that load up. Okay, so we left off in here. We kind of got rid of some stuff in here we didn't really need. So over here on the left hand side where it says variables, we're going to need some variables to keep track of our player's health and to be able to, when our character takes damage. So the first ones we're going to use is, we'll probably create 4 variables today. And we'll use the health variables, and we'll also go ahead and set up our stamina variables, because they'll be the same type. We just we won't be using them in this video yet. So to create a new variable, we're just going to go right over here to the My Blueprint section, and we're going to go to variables, and we're going to click this little plus sign. And when we do, we'll get a new variable, and it generally will always be the last type of variable, or if we just reopen our project, it will be a Boolean type, which we'll get into that in just a second. So what we're going to do is we're going to name this variable, and we're going to name things using camel casing and things that make sense so that we can find them later. So we're going to call this health. So just name it health, press the enter key. And then over here in our details panel, we're going to set up some information. We're going to change the type of variable that it is. A Boolean variable basically just gives us a true false value, so we need to actually track a value. So we're going to change that to a float. And what a float will allow is, it will allow us to have negative values and also decimal values. An integer is only going to give us whole numbers, so we don't want to use integer in this particular process here. So we're going to choose float, and you'll notice it gives us this little lime green looking color. It's not going to be editable, and we'll get into maybe some of these other things here later. The tooltip will actually allow you to mouse over your variable and give you some information about it. So we're just going to say here, the player's current health. And when we do that, if you notice, if you come over here back to your variable and you lay your mouse over it, it will say the player's current health, which is what we typed in here. So this is just a handy little thing to let you give your variable some information about what it actually does. And you can also do this with functions and other things as well. So we're not going to worry about any of the rest of these right here, but we are going to change the category. The little drop arrow here, we can click that. You can see this is default, my character, and character. And we're going to create a new one. And the way you create a new one is just click in there and just type it in. So we're going to say player stats. Okay. And now you'll notice that over here it changes and adds this category, and it places the health variable inside there. Now you'll notice down here towards the bottom, replication, as if we were doing a multiplayer game, you would be using maybe some replication, but we're not going to worry about that since this is a single player project. So it says please compile the blueprint to give a default value. So anytime you create a new variable, to give it a default value, you have to compile your blueprint. So we just go up here and click compile. And when we do, now we have the option to give it a value. So I'm going to change this value to 100. So we'll give it a default of 100, and you'll see how we use this a little bit later. Okay. Now we're also going to need a maximum health variable. So we want it to be in the same category. We could just simply click it here, but I'm going to show you a different way. Since we already have this in the category and we want this to be in the same type, we can right click on this variable and we can choose to duplicate it. And since that is what we're going to just go back here and we're going to just change its name to max health. And it will keep it in there. And when we click that, it gives us a tooltip, the player's current health. So we're going to say, change the tooltip to the player's maximum health. Okay. I'm going to leave it in player stats. It's fine. It's going to be a float. And we can compile it. And we're going to leave it as 100 as well. So that's what we want to kind of. Now this could be changed at various times, and we can give our character more maximum health if we choose to at a later time. Okay, so we'll go ahead and duplicate this variable again, and we'll just call this stamina. All right, so stamina, we're just going to say this is the player's same type here. We're going to say this is the player's stamina. We'll say current stamina, because this will track our player's current stamina. Okay, it should be in player stats. We'll compile that. It's going to be 100. That's fine. And we'll do one more. So we'll go ahead and duplicate this one, and we'll just say max stamina. This will actually make more sense while we do this when we get into creating progress bars and visually showing this on the screen. So we want to say the player's maximum stamina. Okay, and we'll compile that. Gives us a value of 100. So now if I mouse over that, the player's current health, the player's maximum health, the player's current stamina, and the player's maximum stamina. Okay, so we got our default values, our 4 variables that we need right now created. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move on to creating our damage function. So we're going to create our own custom function to track when our character takes damage and to reduce the health. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go here to the function section. So here, still in my blueprint, we're going to go to functions, and we can create a new function by pressing this plus button. So we're going to click plus, and now we have a new function, and it will come up in its own graph. So here was our event graph. Now we have our new function, has its very own graph all by itself, and it will be purple inside the graph. Okay, so new function, we'll just call this player damage. Okay, so this will handle anytime that our player takes damage in our game. We can actually run this function, and we can reduce the amount of health that our character has. Okay, so to do that, we're going to need one input. So if we have this selected here, and we go over here in our details panel, you can see it's the default category. We could give it a description of what it does if we want to. It's kind of self-explanatory, but we could do that if we wanted to. We're going to go here, and we're going to need one input. So we're going to click this plus sign here, and that will add an input value here that we can input some information from outside when we actually run this function. So we're going to say this, call it damage amount. Okay, so damage amount, and we're going to say that's a float type. Okay, that will correspond with our variable type. So now what we need to do is we need to, when we take damage, we want to see what our character's health is now, and we want to subtract from that the amount of damage we received from whatever source it might have been, and then we will reset our health variable to the net new value. So we're going to take our health variable, and the way we're going to need that out here on our graph. So we're going to just left click on this here and drag it out and place it right about here. And you'll notice we get an option get or set. In this case, we want to get it because we want to see what it is currently. So a get variable will just give you what it is. Okay, I'm going to add a comment. You can right click and you can say node comment. You can say this is get. Okay, and we're going to take this damage amount. We're going to take our health, and we're going to drag off of this pin, and we're going to drag out here and let go, and we're going to subtract. So we're going to look for a little function called float minus float, and we want to make sure that this health value here is in the top, okay, and that it is health, not max health or anything else. So you can see here it says health minus, and right now it says 1. So we want to take this amount here, and we're going to plug the value we feed into that into this bottom. Okay, so now we will take our current health, And at the beginning it should be 100. And for example, if we took 10 points of damage, that would be the amount that would come into this function, and we would take 100 to subtract the 10 from it. It would give us a result on the other side, which in this case would be 90. Okay, and it would continue to do that, and that's a simple subtraction. So it would subtract, take the health as the top number, the amount of damage to the bottom number. Okay, now one thing we need to do before we set our new value is we want to make sure that our health value doesn't go below 0, which it could if we don't do this next step. We want to kind of avoid that for as we progress through our function. If our health was, say, 5, we had current health of 5, and we took 10 points of damage, we would have a -5. And that would make it a little more problematic to do our branch checking to be able to do the next step. So we want to use a clamp. Okay, so we're just going to take off here, and we'll drag off this result, and we'll type in the word clamp. And we should look for a function called clamp float, since this is a float value that we're dealing with. So once we do that, we'll notice that we get a value, then we have a minimum and a maximum box. So we're going to say the minimum is 0, so that means that no matter what this result is here from the subtraction of these two values, it can never go below 0.0, which will be in the next couple steps. You'll understand why we're doing this. But we'll notice that max is set to 1. So we don't know, we don't want this to be 1, because if I had 100 health, took 10 damage, that would be 90, but it would set our health to 1 because that would be the maximum amount allowed. So to fix that, we're going to take our maximum health variable here, and we're going to drag that out, and we're going to get that as well, and we're going to say plug that into the max. Okay, so 0 would be the minimum, the maximum would be whatever our max health is, which would always be at least equal to or greater than our health. Okay, so that'll take care of that little function process there. Then what we want to do is we want to set our health variable out here. So we want to set it this time. So we'll choose set and plug that in here. So when this function runs, it's going to set our health, and then it's going to go back and it's going to run the float function and everything else that kind of flows into it. So we're going to take this return value here, plug it in here, and whatever this return value or this result will feed into this and set our health to the new value. So if it happens again, if this happened to be 10, we would get a result of 90. 100 minus 10 will be 90. This will be 90, and if we run this function again, now this would be 90 minus however much this would be, and so on down the line. Okay, so this right here would be sufficient for just reducing our health, but it doesn't really do anything else. So it doesn't know if we have enough health, what our health is currently, or in the grand scheme of things. And once our character runs out of health, our character should be taken out of the game, or the game would end. So what we want to do is we want to do a branch check to see what is our health now, and is it equal to 0. So we'll do a lot of branch checking. This is basically an if-then. So the easiest way to create a branch is to hold B as in boy, on your keyboard and left click. And when you do, wherever your mouse cursor is, that's where this node will show up. So we're going to just plug this execution pin in here. It's very important that these white pins are connected to one another, because once this runs, it sends information down this wire to this node here, and then in turn it will send it down to this one. So everything flows from left to right. If these are not connected, it will not function any further than where this last line hooks into. Okay, the next step is we're going to take our health variable here. So we're going to say health, and we're going to get it, and then we're just going to say drag off of that, and we're going to say equals. So we're going to use a condition. So we're going to say an equal float. So we're going to say, is our float value health equal to 0? We'll leave it at 0 and plug that in. You'll notice it's a red pin. This can only be true or false. Okay, so the next step is, what happens if it's true? What happens if our health is 0? We're going to have to do something up here. What if it's false? Okay, if it's false, what we're going to do now, because it means we still have health, we just want to continue on, we're just going to use a return node. So just type in, pull the wire off and type in return. You'll see it says add return node. And if you notice when you mouse over, it says the node terminates the function's execution, and it returns output parameter. So it will stop the function from running, and it will just go back out to what it's normally doing. Okay? All right, so the next step is in this process is we're going to say, well, what if my health is done? So I don't have any more health left. So what we can do there is we can just simply go here, and we will add when we add some additional functionality in other places, we'll come back in and adjust this. But for now, we're going to say quit game. So when we run out of health, we're just going to say quit game. Now we will create some that will allow us to check to see how many lives we have, and we'll do some functionality there. And once we do that, we will create a respawning system to respawn our character somewhere else in the game, and we will add that functionality in here at a later time. We want to check to see, is this actually going to work for us? Okay, so what we want to do is we'll go ahead and compile this, and over here on our event graph, we'll just go right below our movement input here, and we're going to add a little test system here. So we're going to test to see, is this actually going to work, okay, the way we intend it to. So this is only for testing purposes, and we'll kind of comment it out for that purpose. So we're going to right click in here, and we're just going to use the H key on our keyboard as for health. So we go H, and you can notice if I start typing the word key, we should get the input keyboard events, and there's our H. So we'll click that. So when we press the letter H, then we're going to take our player damage function, and we're going to run that. So if we just take and left click here, drag it out on the level, or we could search for it either way, and we have it here, we can just simply press it in here. So when we press H, it's going to run our function. Now you notice there is our input that we created here. So you see our damage amount, this is what's getting, the information's getting fed into that. So we could actually run a wire in from some other source, or we could just tell it an amount here. So just for our testing purposes, I'm just going to put a value of 10. That means that it would take 10 times for me to run out of health, and before that my character would be finished on the game. So player damage here, and we're not probably going to see a value here, but this is what we want to see. Okay, and so if I click here and hit compile, one thing we can do let's just do a debug. Okay, and so we go back in here, and right in between the branch here and our health, we can drag up here, and this is just something we'll do temporarily, and we'll go up here and we'll say print string. Okay, and you'll notice it just kind of fits it in between for us, and it says development only, which means that it's only going to be for development purposes. So we will use this to see what is our health, and just kind of give us a visual on the screen of what's actually going on to test our code. So we'll take this little wire here, and we'll plug it in here, and you'll notice it says convert float to string, and we'll get this little conversion. Okay, so what that will do is when it goes through here, we take damage, it goes through here, it will actually run this print string, and it will print whatever this value is here, and then it will go on and check everything else. So let's try that and see what happens. So we got here in our level, and we're going to press the play button, and I'm going to hit F11 to full screen this so it's a little easier to see. And up in the upper left hand corner is where you'll see the print strings happen. So if I'm up here and my character's running around, and I press the H key, we should see a 90 appear in the top left in blue. So now I should have 90 health. I press it again, I have 80, 70, and if I'm running around here, my character's still going. Now I'm at 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. The next time it should hit 0 and the game should stop. So when we press H, sure enough, the game stops. Okay, so that is what we intended, or we anticipated would happen. So once our character took enough damage, is the game stopped. Okay, so if yours did that, that means that your function is working correctly. So again, this is a quick review. We'll review this real quickly before we kind of end this one. And then we'll get into the next one. We'll add some additional functionality. Let's see here. Well, we will do this we'll go ahead and lengthen this video. It's at about 20 minutes right now, but we can go ahead and add some additional information. But we'll do this one thing before we do it. So let's go back over here, and we're going to go and we're going to create something to anticipate for our next video to go through this. Is we have game modes here, and we're going to do a respawn system inside our game mode. So what we can do is we're going to go in this blueprint here, and we're going to create in our game mode a game instance. Okay, game instance, we can track our player lives. This is the best place to kind of track that information instead of inside of our character. So we want something outside of our character to be able to check that. So we're going to right click in our game mode folder, and we go to blueprint class, and then down here under all classes, we're going to click that down. We're going to say game instance. So we're looking here for this function here, game instance, and what this does is just keep track of our running game. Okay, and so we're going to select that, and we'll just call this RPG game instance. Okay, and we'll go ahead and open it up. You'll notice it just has a circle right there, so we'll open this up, and in here we're going to create a couple of variables. So we'll create one variable called player lives. Okay, and we'll make that an integer. Okay, we don't really need a default category because we're only going to have these few in here. And then we'll also do another variable called player max lives. Okay, so player max lives. We'll go ahead and compile, and we'll say our player max lives, we'll say is 5. So the most lives we can have is 5, and player lives will start out with 3. Okay, and pretty simple, just those two. This we'll actually call this in a minute. So we're going to create a couple of functions in here, very simple. We're going to say create a function up here. We're going to call this reduce player lives. Okay, and we're going to take our player lives here, we're going to get it, and then we'll take our player lives out here and we'll set it. Okay, and we'll just say minus, and if we use what's called a decrement int, it will subtract 1 from the specified value and then set it. Okay, so we can say this right here, this will actually just take 1 away and then set us a value. Okay, so that's pretty much all we need to do for here, and we're going to say return. So we'll add a return node here. So that's pretty much all we need to do for that one. And let's go ahead and hit function, and we'll say increase player lives. All right, so in here we're going to get our player lives, and we're going to do plus. So we increment int, we can do this here, and we can set player lives. But one thing we might want to do here is to add a clamp. So we'll clamp the integer in this case. So what we can do here is we can take this here, we can plug this value in, and we'll take our player max lives, plug that into the bottom. So that way that our increase cannot go higher than our maximum player lives. We'll plug this in here to player lives and plug that into the value there. So this in essence is we prevent it from going above our maximum player lives, and then we'll just simply do a return node. So what we use this for is we will use this if we have some health pickups or live pickups and we want to increase the number of lives our player may have. Okay, so that's pretty much all we need to do for this particular blueprint. So we can close that out. And one thing we need to do to make sure that it uses this game instance is go into our project settings. So if we go here to settings, project settings, wait for that to open. And then we'll go back to our maps and modes category. And down here in the bottom of this section, you'll notice it says game instance class. So let's go ahead and say RPG game instance, the one we just created, and make sure that it is using that one so that this actually does work. Okay, so go ahead and do that, and we're going to say this here. So we'll go back in our player damage function here, and once we go true here, we can say, to make sure that we can do a check real quick, we can say get game instance, and this will allow us to go and run that function to reduce our player's lives. So we're going to get the game instance, and then from here we're going to cast to RPG game instance. That will allow us to be able to get information from that blueprint we just created. So once we do that, we're going to, anytime you do a cast, it just basically allows you to communicate with a separate blueprint that you're not currently working in, but you need information or to run functions or pick variable values and things like that. So as our RPG game instance, we're going to, anytime you have a cast node, you want to pull off of the blue pin here to be able to get information. So we're going to drag down from here, and we're going to say reduce player lives, and there's our function that we made. So reduce player lives should go ahead and take care of that process. And then before we quit our game, we're going to do a branch check. So we'll do another branch check here, and we're going to say we're going to get from here, we're also going to get our player lives. So say get player lives. So we want to know what they are. After this function runs, we want to know what they are. So we're going to say, we're just going to use the greater than symbol. So we're going to say integer greater than integer. So is our player lives still greater than 0? If that is true, we won't do anything. If it's false, means we have no more lives, we'll just quit the game then. Okay. From here, we can do a return node. If it is true, it's greater than 0, we can return. Now what we'll probably do from this point here is we will, once we set up, and we'll do it in the next video since this one's getting almost to be 30 minutes long, is we will go into our game mode. We'll add a landscape. I'll show you how to add a landscape level. So we'll basically be getting rid of this level here and creating a new one. And so we'll start the next video with that. And then we will set up our game mode respawning system, and show how we can, as we go into this function here, if we lose all of our lives and we still have health, we will go out and respawn our character somewhere else. So we'll do that in our next video, as well as our landscape. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.